All right, good evening, everybody. I'm 5 News Chief Meteorologist Skot Covert. It's Sunday night, right at 7 o'clock, and I wanted to give you a briefing on everything we're expecting over the next several days. And I'll tell you, it's a lot. We're going to call for a weather impact alert, not just for Tuesday, but we've added Wednesday and Thursday. It's not just a one-punch storm, it's a 1-2 punch. First of which, we're going to have the wintry precipitation beginning on Tuesday. Of course, that's where we draw a lot of our attention. We want to know how much snow, when's it going to arrive? I'll answer a lot of those questions right here in this stream tonight, but we have to also keep in mind the likelihood of seeing some very dangerously cold temperatures Wednesday and Thursday. And I'll tell you, wind chill values likely as low as -20 across parts of the area. Plan accordingly. We'll have more updates frequently right here on 5 Plus and, of course, over on 5 News as well. Here are the current winter storm alerts that are in effect at the moment. We have a winter storm watch in effect for northwest Arkansas. Now, if you're tuning in this evening here in the River Valley and you say, Scott, I'm not under anything. Well, you're right, but I suspect you'll probably be added to at least a winter weather advisory over the next 12 to 24 hours. So expect that to be one of those updates that I anticipate being able to pass along to you. It's in northwest Arkansas where we do expect the highest impacts to occur with this system. It's a little bit different than the one back in January where the River Valley saw the most impacts. We'll take a little bit closer look here. Of course, Fayetteville, Washington County included in this winter storm watch, as is Bella Vista, Pea Ridge, Decatur, Gravette, Highfield, Siloam Springs, Huntsville, Witter, St. Paul, Eureka Springs, Berryville, and that extends pretty much in all of North Arkansas. Those northern 2 rows of counties closest to the Missouri border also included in this winter storm watch. It's a watch right now. We very well could see it upgraded to a warning, a winter storm warning. I would expect that to happen either late tonight at the earliest, more likely going into tomorrow. Let's look at Futurecast. This is going to give us a pretty good idea of timing, but it's not perfect. This model isn't the gospel. I do expect some changes, but at least for right now, I think it's pretty symbolic of when we can expect things to really get going. This is Tuesday morning, 7 o'clock. We're mostly dry, but precipitation just off to our west. It's a little bit scattered initially early in the morning. That'll slowly be working its way our direction. By 9 o'clock, it's not out of the question that we could have some showers in northwest Arkansas. Blue here is going to be snow. Pink is going to be sleet, freezing rain, snow mix. And then, of course, green is just plain old cold rain. Here's 11 o'clock. So certainly the closer we get to the lunch hour, a better chance that we're seeing some moisture, some precipitation around the area. Bulk of the snow likely going to be north of Interstate 40. South of Interstate 40, it's likely going to start off as a mix. Sleet and rain probably initially first before eventually transitioning completely over to snow by Tuesday night. Now this is lunchtime. Look at the temperatures. We are definitively below freezing in northwest Arkansas. So whatever falls at 26, at 25 degrees, it's going to start to cause some road impacts almost immediately. Now, maybe not necessarily the case in the River Valley. We're hovering at 30, 31 degrees, maybe those road temperatures slightly warmer than that. So I don't expect roads to be immediately slick in the River Valley, but it's not going to take long, especially if we get some heavier precipitation to fall. Let's take it a little bit further. We'll pause this here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Most of the area probably seeing a good clip of something. The question becomes what type of precipitation. Your geography is going to dictate that. The closer you are to that Missouri border, higher odds of mostly snow. The further south you go, especially south of Interstate 40, probably a rain, sleet, snow mix. At times, more sleet probably than anything else. It looks like the afternoon and evening hours are when we're going to see the most precipitation. It's when it's going to be the heaviest, right? Temperatures continue to fall. This is 4:30. We're down into the low 20s. We're starting to find ourselves in the 20s in the River Valley. Impacts certainly start to look more likely at that point. By Tuesday night, this is 8:30. A lot of that, what was sleet and freezing rain in the River Valley, starts to transition over into a little bit of snow. Again, your blue is your snow. Keep in mind these temperatures: 14 Bentonville, Rogers, 25 Ozark, 26 Poto. By Tuesday night, those numbers are likely to continue falling. We'll get closer to midnight. Probably still a few light snow showers lingering into the area. It'll probably be slow to completely come to an end, but I do think by early Wednesday morning, we're tapering off. There won't be a lot more to accumulate by Tuesday morning. You might wake up to a few flurries out there, not likely to amount to much more than that after 7 o'clock Wednesday morning. So what in the world is going to fall from the sky? Mostly snow north of the tunnel. I'd say Benton, Carroll, Madison, Washington County, Delaware, and Adair as well. Mostly snow. We get into the river valley, and I'll tell you, we have a little less confidence in what's going to happen the further south we go. And the reason why there isn't as much confidence as up north, cold air coming into this area is really tricky. The mountains play a big role. Oftentimes it can slow it down, but oftentimes models don't really handle it super well. And so you start to have more questions as we get further south. With what we know right now, it looks like things will start as maybe a little bit of rain, maybe a little bit of sleet before quickly transitioning over to mostly snow. Does that mean entirely snow in Northwest Arkansas? No, but more often than not, we're looking at snow showers. We get into that I-40 corridor, let's say between Sallisaw and Clarksville. That's when we're going to see probably a little bit of rain at first. It'll slowly transition over to sleet. That's probably what we see more of than anything else. And then eventually over to some snow by late Tuesday night. We get into the Ouachitas. We're talking southern LaFleur. We're talking southern Sebastian and Scott counties, even parts of Logan. Rain and a little bit of sleet more likely than anything else. And of course, the further south you go, likely less accumulation that we can get. Here's what we're going to call for. This is our first call. I'll tell you, these numbers are subject to some change. We're getting data in at this point almost every hour. Joshua working here by myself this evening. Alongside me this evening, and we're reviewing this data as it comes in, making sure we don't need to update these numbers. I do anticipate updates, but with what we know right now, this is what we're looking at. From a broad perspective, the closer to the Missouri border you are, the more accumulation you're likely to have on the ground by the time you wake up Wednesday morning. The further south you go, probably less accumulation, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be free of any impacts. Given how cold it's going to get behind this system, it's not going to take a lot to start to freeze and cause some slick spots out on the roadways. Let's start in Northwest Arkansas. Let's work our way south. Mostly snow. Here's where we're located in Benton and Carroll County, where it appears that there very well could be a heavier band of snow resulting 6 to 8 inches between Gravette, Decatur, Bentonville, Rogers, War Eagle. We get into Eureka. We're close to the Hinesville. We're close to Clifty, right? I really think that's where we're going to find the heaviest amounts. Now, if you were to continue going further north up towards Joplin, you may even find more snow than this. For a broad majority of Washington and even Madison County, I really think 3 to 6 inches is going to be common in places like Farmington and West Fork and Prairie Grove, Fayetteville, Elkins, Goshen, over into Huntsville as well. That's going to be 3 to 6 inches. Now, it's really important to point out that sometimes when people look at these maps, they only look at the far right-hand number. They only look at the higher end of the scale, and I think, Scott's promising me 6 inches. Maybe not necessarily the case. A lot of us are going to fall in between that range somewhere, and it's likely going to vary from town to town. And sometimes it varies within a single town. The west side of Fayetteville may pick up 3 inches. The east side of the town may pick up closer to 6. That's kind of how the dynamic situation of these events often unfolds. Now we get to that River Valley corridor, 1 to 3 inches of a sleet snow mix is going to be common. With temperatures falling rapidly, that sleet could cause additional slick spots out on the roadways just as much as in Northwest Arkansas, where they're picking up a little bit more accumulation, but it's often in the form of snow. So while these numbers may look lower, and they are, that doesn't mean the impacts are going to be necessarily any less. Now we get into the Ouachitas, things are even more uncertain here, but it really looks like we'll see a rain initially. Those cold air temperatures trying to work their way south. It's just going to take a little bit longer, eventually transitioning over into some sleet. Some snow can't be ruled out, especially on the tail end of the event by Tuesday night. Could pick up upwards of a quarter of freezing rain. That's going to be some ice. Now, I don't think everyone in the green color here is going to pick up a 1/4 inch of ice, but I think on the high end, especially where we get a little bit of elevation, that's what we could be looking at. So what overall impacts does all of this bring? We're kind of maxed out. I think there's going to be a high degree of travel impacts. We're going to see closures on Tuesday. We'll probably see closures on Wednesday. And we've got to talk about the extreme cold. We'll dive right into that too. Power outages right now, I'm going to keep in the low category. Could that change? Yes. It's really going to come down to where that freezing rain potential materializes, or maybe it doesn't materialize at all. Right now, with the forecast totals that we just showed you, upwards of a quarter, I don't think that's going to be too big of an issue for us. Now, one of the other things that we're really honing in on for Tuesday are the wind speeds. And the reason that's really important to us, these winds are going to be pretty breezy. These are maximum wind gusts in northwest Arkansas, 25 to 30 miles per hour. In the River Valley, we could be in excess of 30-mile-per-hour gusts. Now, this isn't sustained wind, but it is those occasional gusts that you may get. And the reason that this could be problematic for us is if we start getting snow flurries, if we start getting sleet to fly, this is really going to reduce visibility even more so out on those interstates, those roadways, those secondary side streets as well. So even though the road itself may be passable, may be free of slick spots at times, as long as this precipitation's falling and this wind's blowing it around at these speeds, visibility is going to present some dangerous travel out there. Winds are likely to stay breezy most of the day. So let's talk about a timeline for Tuesday travel impacts. I think the first part of the day we're generally going to be okay, but things very well could start to deteriorate somewhat quickly. Medium impacts by late morning, early afternoon. I really think by noon, though, we're probably looking at a high degree of impacts as that moisture really moves into the area. Again, this is going to be subject to some change, but I think the key takeaway is the worst impacts that you can experience is going to be after the lunch hour in both northwest Arkansas and the River Valley, likely continuing into the better majority of Tuesday night and probably really through Wednesday, if we're being really honest. Part of the reason why, it's the temperatures. Behind this system, the polar vortex is going to push us some bitterly cold air. And we're talking not only uncomfortable, but truly dangerous. And sometimes I think that word gets thrown around a little too loosely. But the numbers that we're looking at certainly warrant some special caution. We have a cold, extreme cold watch in effect for all of northwest Arkansas, portions of the River Valley, almost all of Oklahoma. I'll tell you, while Johnson, Logan, and Scott's not included right now, I think it's probably just a matter of time. This kind of gets into the semantics, into the weeds here, but everyone that's under the watch right now, we're taken care of by the National Weather Service out of Tulsa. Meanwhile, Scott, Logan, and Johnson County is the responsibility of the Weather Service in Little Rock. Sometimes it just takes them a little bit longer to get on the same page. I suspect that will be the case, simply given we're looking at some very dangerous temperatures. Extreme cold watch or not, I think it's going to be just downright bitter cold. I will tell you, if you've never heard of an extreme cold watch, that's for good reason. This is the first year these have been in existence. Previously, this same product was a wind chill advisory. We don't call it that anymore. They just changed the name of it, but in essence, it's the same thing. Here's the polar vortex. Typically, it's at the North Pole and it stays really tight. And while you might hear about the polar vortex more often these days, it's really nothing new. It's just become one of those fancy buzzwords that the national media loves to pick up, and it sounds scary and sounds doom and gloom, but it really has been in existence since the beginning of time. Often it stays really strong, really tightly wound up at the North Pole, but occasionally it can weaken. And when it weakens, that's when it sends us these lobes of really cold air. And this is going to be Wednesday. You can see that lobe of cold air really diving right down into our area. Winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere get really windy, and that's going to push a lot of those cold temperatures right into our neck of the woods, at least for 3 to 4 days this week. It looks like we're going to begin below freezing Tuesday morning, and we very well might not get above freezing until Saturday. And we're talking actual air temperatures. I'm about to show you the wind chills. Those are going to be the scary looking numbers, but actual air temperatures below freezing. And we're not talking about a couple of degrees. We're talking about several degrees that without question puts unprotected pipes at a high risk of bursting. We've had a couple of cold spells already this winter. So if by chance you haven't insulated those pipes, protected your home, you really got to be doing that tonight or tomorrow. Once those numbers go below freezing by Tuesday, it's going to get downright chilly. This is Wednesday morning wind chill values. Wednesday morning, 14 below zero, Bentonville, 13 below Rogers, 12 below Fayetteville, 11 below in Huntsville. We get into the River Valley and we're hovering right around zero, give or take. But to be honest, I don't even know if you can tell the difference between 1 and -8 in Sallisaw. Either way, it's just going to be downright cold out there. And this is Wednesday morning. So with numbers like that, it's going to be tough to get any road condition improvements. Those road crews are really good at what they do. And they were really fast and efficient back in January. Mother Nature helped them out a little bit. Mother Nature's not helping this time. Temperatures are going to remain just dangerously cold. Let's go back to Thursday. It gets even colder. While Tuesday the storm system arrives, it's going to pretty much open up the back door. Canada's air just spills right down into the lower 48, and it doesn't stop until probably Friday when we start to slowly, I'll call it a warm up, but it's still going to be cold out there. Wind Thursday morning, -19, -18, -16, -18 again. So near 20 below Thursday morning at 6 a.m. We're likely around 10 below in the River Valley, around 10 below in the Ouachitas. When I tell you Thursday is going to be just absolutely cold, it's probably going to be the coldest it's been since the big Arctic outbreak back in 2021. If you remember that, it was only a few years ago, right? This is going to be just absolutely just chilling. Friday morning, we're making progress. I told you I wasn't going to call it a warm up, but at least it's not going to be as bad. Still looking at negative feels like temperatures or wind chill values in Northwest Arkansas, warming up into the low to mid single digits here in the River Valley. Talk about ice just a little bit. It really looks like it's going to be south of I-40. These are a couple of different models. This first one I'm showing you, it's what they call the European model. It's one of two major global models that we really rely heavily on. And it's looking like it's been doing a little bit better job than some of the others. This puts ice accretion, which is the technical term for it. You can think of it as accumulation. Ice developing on things as freezing rain. Likely around 2/10 of an inch. You know, it's kind of taken Waldron to 3/10 of an inch. We'll see if that actually happens. I'll show you the other one. This is going to be the GFS. It's the American model, and it has a pretty similar footprint, but it has much lower totals. I'll tell you the GFS has been somewhat of an outlier as we've been forecasting the system the last several days, but beginning late this afternoon into this evening, it started to kind of get in line with the rest of the models. So I wanted to show you both of these, not as either of them are the gospel necessarily, but to give you a range of potential outcomes. These ice numbers, I'll tell you, aren't really that too concerning. Much like what we dealt with earlier last week, this previous week, we're in this nuisance category. Yes, there very well could be slick spots on the roads. And with the temperatures dropping as quickly and as low as they're going to go, you can bet on it. Light icing on some trees, some cars, your trash cans, elevated surfaces, certainly going to be possible with those numbers. To get widespread power outages, we're talking more than 1/4 of an inch. Really, you need to get closer to about a 1/2 inch of ice to develop on those lines and on those trees for the tree limbs to break, fallen lines, things like that. That's where you start to get into serious trouble. Right now, I don't think really many of us are going to be in this category, if anybody at all. Could that change? Yes, and that's why when I tell you we're looking at data every hour, we're looking at data every hour just to make sure. But everything we've noticed and we forecast thus far keeps us in that nuisance category. Let's really stay on top of that just in case. I want to show you the 7-day forecast. Just so you can get an idea of what you're expecting this week. 45 degrees tomorrow, a little bit warmer. In fact, it's going to be warmer than it was today. Don't let that catch you off guard. I would use tomorrow's weather to really get prepared for what's to come. We'll keep your percentage at 80% on Tuesday. Only reason it's not 100 is I think for a few hours that morning will probably be dry. Wednesday, we might have a flurry or two in the morning, but not necessarily a big deal. These are actual air temperatures. A second ago, I showed you wind chill values, right? Well, these are actual air temperatures. The low in Northwest Arkansas, 5 Wednesday morning, 15 Wednesday afternoon. We're down to -3 Thursday. Keep in mind, that's the coldest day of the week. The actual thermometer says -3. You factor in the wind. When that hits you in the face, boy, it just slaps you. It's going to feel like we're about low, about -20, Northwest Arkansas, -10, the River Valley, 18 the high. We'll close out the work week. We're still below freezing at our warmest at 27. Look to get above freezing for the first time for a few hours Saturday afternoon. That warming trend by 7 days from now takes us back into the upper 40s, which I'll tell you is actually a little bit below average for this time of the year. In the River Valley, we're going to maintain that weather impact alert all 3 days as well. Of course, it's for precipitation on Tuesday, and then it's for temperatures Wednesday and Thursday. Look, I'll tell you, it says 60%. Don't let that mislead you. That's only because we'll have a few hours of dry period in the morning hours before that rain eventually moves in, starts to translate to sleet. Eventually, it's going to morph over into a little bit of snow there as well. 13 Wednesday morning, 6 your low Thursday. Highs only making it near the mid-20s. Eventually, we'll briefly warm up above freezing Friday afternoon, but only by a degree or two. That's your 7-day forecast. I do want to go back to the top. We'll take another look at that snow accumulation map for maybe somebody that is just now tuning in and give you an idea of what you can expect in your neck of the woods. Good to see everybody right here on 5+. Here's this thing. We're going to be live on 5+ a lot over the next several days. In fact, you're going to find more frequent updates right here than on any other platform. So make this your home for up-to-date snow coverage. Key takeaway, when you look at it from a broad perspective, the highest totals closest to the Missouri border. The further north you go into, let's say even Joplin, Springfield, you very well could see 8 to 12 inches of snow. Could that change and shift our direction? That's the million-dollar question. I don't think so at this point, but yeah, it's certainly a real possibility that this shifts either north or south. I'll tell you, if there's been any shift at all today, the higher totals have been shifting a little bit further towards the south. We watch those updates to make sure we don't need to adjust our maps. Right now, we're holding steady on this, but if the data consistently shifts south, then maybe we'll update our numbers there as well. The heaviest band of snow likely moving through places like Gravette, Decatur, Centerton, Bentonville, Bella Vista, Garfield, War Eagle, Rogers, over into Eureka Springs, Green Forest. It really looks like that northern row of counties closest to the Missouri border stands to see the most accumulation. That's not to say it's not impressive in Washington or Madison, 3 to 6 inches there, right? We get into the I-40 corridor, things become a little less certain simply because we don't know how far south that cold Arctic air is going to get and when it's going to get that far south. And that's going to dictate a lot of things. 1 to 3 inches of a sleet snow mix. Right now, with what I'm seeing, I would say more of that 1 inch is probably going to be sleet, with many of us trending probably closer to 1 inch. 3 is probably going to be on the high end for some isolated spots. So certainly not the impactful winter weather event that we had back in January in terms of high totals, but it's likely to be just as impactful when it comes to road conditions simply because the temperatures are going to be so stinking cold. In the Ouachitas, further south we go, we get a little bit of elevation. That's helpful to one extent, but the further south we go, we're getting away from that source of cold air. It may take a little bit longer for it to get here, so trace upwards of an inch. A lot of uncertainty when it comes to anywhere from Poteau through Mansfield, Hackett, Greenwood, I'd see at Charleston and Boonville, certainly Magazine and points off towards the south simply because we don't know how far south that cold air is going to get and when it's going to get there. But I do think a trace upwards of an inch of a mostly sleet mix is probably likely before it all transitions over into a little bit of snow on the backside by, let's say, late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning at the latest. And then things are probably going to be slow to improve on those roadways Wednesday and Thursday simply because temperatures are going to stay so cold. All right, current time here is, what time is it? It is 7:23. That's the latest forecast we've got. Joshua's going to be in here at the 10 o'clock newscast. He's going to have an entirely new set of data to review to make sure we don't need to adjust this. Stay tuned at the 10 o'clock newscast. You can catch that right here on 5 Plus as well. And then, of course, meteorologist Stephen Elmore is going to be in first thing tomorrow morning with another fresh set of data. So the forecast, as it stands, calls for this. Is it locked into place? Are we taking it to the bank? No, absolutely not. There could still be additional changes. Key takeaways right now, very impactful accumulations north of I-40. Wouldn't necessarily ignore those accumulation totals, even though they're a little bit lower in the River Valley, simply because it does include a little bit of sleet, maybe a little bit of freezing rain. Roads can certainly deteriorate there. And while we get really focused on accumulation totals, we can't necessarily lose sight of the dangerously cold temperatures that are to follow Wednesday and Thursday. All right, that's going to do it for me here tonight. Check back in with us at 10 o'clock with Joshua for the latest updates. For all of us here at 5 News, I'm Chief Meteorologist Skot Covert.